Hello and welcome to this webinar on Japan-UK cooperation in international economy and trade. My name is Marianne Schneider-Petzinger. I'm a senior research fellow here at Chatham House and direct the Global Trade Policy Forum as well. I'm really delighted to be welcoming you to this webinar that's going to explore how the trade relationship between Japan and the UK can be strengthened further. We're going to look at the economic and the strategic rationale for doing so, also for the implications, not only for the bilateral relationship, but also broader engagement with the Indo-Pacific region. And I'm doubly excited to be sharing this event today because it's part of a series of 4 webinars held in partnership with Japan House London. I'll turn it over to Michael Houlihan, the Director General of Japan House, for his welcome remarks in just a second. But let me just say that this event is taking place on the record. And after we've heard from our speakers, you'll have plenty of opportunities to join the discussion and submit questions throughout the event by using the Q&A function on Zoom. And without further ado, Michael, let me turn it over to you to welcome our participants.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. So good afternoon, good morning, and probably good evening as well to everyone. Thank you for joining this session. For anyone who doesn't know about Japan House, it's located on Kensington High Street in central London. It's arranged across 3 floors, and it presents visitors with the opportunity to discover, to learn about, and to engage with Japan. It offers a pretty varied range of authentic cultural experiences, such as exhibitions, events, workshops. There's also a library, a shop, travel advice, and gastronomy. And it seeks to build a bridge of deeper understanding and to create an enduring legacy of relationships between the UK and Japan, based upon cultural understanding. As we see today, Japan House is also a forum for the exchange of ideas, new developments, and conversations between the 2 nations across actually a very wide range of topics. And the Chatham House series, the 2 series, have so far covered things such as the aging society, climate change, security, COVID, and last time it was cultural diplomacy. In addition to our physical presence in London, over the last 18 months, we have accelerated the creation of what is probably best described as Japan House Online. This is a digital presence that replicates a virtual version of the physical site. We've created live events and activities which have ranged across manga and craft workshops, through to live sake brewery tours, through to 3D virtual exhibition tours and masterclasses in kitchen skills, as well as the development of an online shop. So please, if you can't visit us, do check out our website for all of these ongoing events. Our latest exhibition, probably the uniquely titled Windowology, Architectural Views from Japan, examines how windows influence our perspectives on the environment, contemporary urban living, craftsmanship, design, architecture, and even print literature. Personally, I actually find it quite intriguing to see how the significance of something as simple and often taken for granted as a window has culturally specific meanings and uses in different cultures. Even in an economically and technologically globalized world, culture has the power to define our view of the outside world. International business relations are probably no different in that respect and will be influenced by a lot of uncontrollable factors such as history, politics, economics, technological, legal, the environmental, and the social. And in this context, social embraces the cultural variations which distinguish one market from another. These cultural variations can be quite complex, touching upon national culture, ethnic culture, industrial culture, company culture, and of course, individual behavior. So in the context of a post-colonial world and culturally diverse multilateral trading partnerships, such as the CPTPP, empathy towards expressions of culture will be important in achieving successful trading relationships. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more in this morning's discussion. So Marianne, if I can hand back to you and we'll get into the meat of the session.
Thank you so much, Michael, for setting the scene of what Japan House does in the physical, but also in the virtual world. And really delighted that Chatham House has this opportunity to partner with you on such an issue, such as economics and trade. It really is not just about economics and trade anymore, but really gets into many of the other issues that you touched upon, whether it's broader issues of society, technology, sustainability. And I'm sure we will talk about this in this session as well. But to start, let me introduce our two speakers. I'm really delighted to be joined by Minaka Morita-Jaeger. She's a senior research fellow in international trade at the University of Sussex and a policy research fellow at the UK Trade Policy Observatory. And I'm also delighted that Christopher Dent is with us. He's a professor in economics and international business at Edgehill University. I'm sorry to keep the introduction so brief, but we unfortunately only have 1 hour, and we really want to hear from you, both Monica and Christopher. So Monica, let me start with you. In 2020, the UK and Japan agreed the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Last year, the UK started the application process to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. I'm sure we'll hear a lot about CPTPP today, this trade bloc of 11 countries that includes Japan. So can you just give us a bit of the background of where we stand with regards to the bilateral relationship and also the strategic and the economic benefits of the UK joining CPTPP, ideally from the perspective of the UK and Japan? So Minako, over to you, please, for your opening remarks.
First of all, deep apology that I couldn't join on time. Somehow that this is the first experience where the Zoom doesn't like me when it is needed. So, but I'm so pleased that I can be here with you. And thank you very much for inviting me to this seminar. So let me just quickly talk about the historical background and then the evolution of the CPTPP. It's the CPTPP from the UK's perspective as well as Japan's perspective, and the more broader issue of the challenge and then also challenge ahead for the UK, and then sort of the collaboration between the UK and Japan for the 21st century trade and the world economy. So to start with, the TPP, which is the former form of the CPTPP, was led by the Obama administration for enhancing its pivot in Asia to counterbalance the growing economic and political influence of China in the region. So its ambition included not only strengthening economic relations with its Asian trade partners, but enhancing security ties with the region. So the US led drafting the text in order to promote market-oriented trade and reflect the US interest in rulemaking. So this is an important fact, especially when it comes to China's accession to the CPTPP, but not for today's discussion. And after the Trump administration withdrew the US from the agreement in 2017, Japan vigorously made efforts to revive the agreement as a TPP-1, which is current CPTPP. So there was a speculation or strong hope that the US would come back to the CPTPP or the TPP. So, but the Biden administration's, the US first approach faded away that hope of the US return within the foreseeable future. So then it comes to the UK joining the CPTPP. So currently, the CPTPP is a regional like-minded middle power club, very long, that promotes free trade. So UK's joining the CPTPP will make the club beyond regional and open the horizon to be global. And the CPTPP is likely to be extended further in the future. Already China and Taiwan made an application to join the CPTPP. And then China's application triggered South Korea to start preparing its application to the club. So that I expect that rapidly, changing geopolitical dynamics would continuously reshape the CPTPP. I just would like to, bear in mind that aspect in terms of the UK and Japan's collaboration in the international economy and trade. So that what is the UK, the CPTPP's joining CPTPP for the UK? So for the UK, joining the CPTPP is a part of its historical geostrategic project. So what is called the Indo-Pacific tilt, that is a shift from its focus from Europe to the Asia-Pacific region. The UK government framed the Indo-Pacific tilt as 3 pillars: economic opportunities, geopolitical security, and sharing core values, such as free trade and democracy. The UK wants to use the CPTPP as a basis for, increasing its political presence in the Asia-Pacific region and using the region's economic dynamism for its economic growth. On the surface, the tilt from Europe to the Indo-Pacific and using CPTPP, creating the economic opportunity, has a strong rationale, since the region is the world's engine of growth, expected to generate 56% of global growth between 2019 and 2050. Brexit will reduce UK total export imports by 15% relative to not leaving the EU, according to the Office of Budget Responsibilities calculation. So the UK needs market to recoup trade losses with the EU incurred by Brexit. However, potential economic gains from joining the CPTPP will be below the expectation. So this is mainly because the UK is already benefiting from preferential trade arrangements under its bilateral FTAs with 7 countries, 7 CPTP countries. These are Canada, Chile, Japan, Mexico, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam, out of 11. And in addition, the UK has signed the FTA with Australia last December. The FTA with New Zealand is expected to follow. So Malaysia and Brunei are likely to be only 2 countries that have no FTA relation with the UK when the UK joined the CPTPP. But these 2 countries have not yet ratified the CPTPP. And UK's trade relation with these countries account for most of UK's trade with the CPTP countries, both in terms of exports and imports. So among the CPTPP member countries, UK's major partners are Canada, Japan, Australia, and Singapore. So these countries are already covered under the bilateral FTAs. And so it's true that main benefits of using, benefit of the UK's joining the CPTPP is, that it offers unified rules that apply to all members. So this is a great advantage for business. For example, the CPTPP's rule of origin arrangement is very generous, as it follows for the full cumulation in inputs from the CPTPP partner countries. However, the evidence shows geographical proximity matter for trade, both in goods and services. So this is a reality. So even the US expectation for economic opportunities is so high, given that the UK already has bilateral FTA relation with most of the CPTPP countries, economic benefits is limited. So the value of UK's joining the CPTPP for the UK is more about geopolitical strategies in the wider foreign policy context. So then what is the challenges for the UK? From the trade policy, expert perspective, so UK's joining the CPTPP can be seen as a symbolic strategic move away from the EU's regulatory model. The main challenge for the UK to join the CPTPP was the potential social impact of such a strategic choice at the domestic level. As explained before, maybe the UK, maybe the first of all, yes, I have to explain. The UK has accepted all CPTP rules to join the club, but it is difficult for the UK to take all of the Asia Pacific style, market-led regulatory regime, because it's just still within the EU's regulatory regime, and it has just departed. So one example is digital trade. So free cross-border data flow with the CPTPP member countries, and that CPTPP rules would serve innovation and create new business opportunity for sure. But how to ensure policy and operation mechanism to maintain the UK's high standard data privacy protection based on GDPR while ensuring free cross-data flow in the region is still uncertain. So, and we had to say that I have to know that the CPTP members have different levels of domestic data privacy law, reflecting the level of development and the different social norms and culture. So that means that there will be the two major challenges in this context. One is the influence of the EU's adequacy decision to the UK. So that the adequacy decision had a 4-year sunset, so that the UK might reassess its decision. And then also relating to this, among the CPTP countries, only Canada, Japan, New Zealand have received adequacy decision from the EU. And also the non-business stakeholders in the UK, such as British Consumer Organization, express a strong concern how the British citizen data privacy is ensured in the CPTPP countries. And another example is how to maintain current level of protection in food and standard safety. But I will leave this issue when we elaborate the discussion later. And so the next topic is what is the CPTPP, and especially UK's joining the CPTPP for Japan. So since the since the US withdrew from the TPP, Japan vigorously initiated to conclude the TPP-1. I observe the two rationales behind. So the first one is the CPTPP as a forum of rule setter. Japan used to be a strong supporter of the multilateral trading system over for decades until the WTO became multifunction, and its existence has been threatened from early 2000s. So through the GATT system to the WTO system, Japan can shift its position from a rule taker to rule maker. So Japan needed an international forum that can support the rules-based trading system and promote free trade in order to achieve its political and economic interests in global trade. So Japan expects the CPTP's potential power to set in the rule for international trade. Second, the CPTP was politically important for Japan from the geopolitical strategy perspective. Having been exposed to economic and political challenges posed by China, that's a 21st century superpower that stands on state-led economy and is located just next door. It is very important for Japan to ensure rules-based market-oriented trade environment in that regard. So from all of these, the UK, the country which has been a front runner of free trade, market economy, and democracy, is exactly the right partner and the right country to be a new member of the CPTPP for Japan. This is why Japan has been endorsing UK's joining CPTPP. So having said that, well, I do not think that accession process goes straightforward as all, trade negotiation is as always the case. So as I said, well, the CPTPP accession rules clearly sets compliance with all of the existing rules as a condition. Japan emphasized every occasion of the, using every occasion its position that is that the UK has to comply with all of the existing rules in the CPTPP without exception. So as I explained, maintaining the high level rule is necessary to make the CPTPP as a global club of free trade and market economy. Since the UK is the first acceding country to the CPTPP, and the country is well-established open economy, and it is going to be the second largest economy once it joins the CPTPP. So Japan expects the UK join the club without any derogation from the rule, with keeping high standard. So then this Japan position is further strengthened by China's application to join the CPTPP. And if the CPTPP member allow political accommodations such as using side letters, for derogation from the legal requirement for the UK, would trigger a race to bottom for future accession. And the high standard CPTPP rule may lose substance, like RCEP, which is, shallower, FTA in the Asia Pacific, which include China. So on the other hand, Japan expects the UK to be the first member of the club as scheduled, by 2022. So because of China's willingness to join the club, Japan wants to strengthen the CPTPP as a club of market economy involving the UK. So this is sort of the political dilemma, as far as I understand.
Great. Minako, you've really set out a broad range of issues that I'm sure we'll get back to during the discussion. I have a number of questions as well.
I'm happy to.
But there's one key point I think that you highlighted towards the end here, which is that if the UK's joining of CPTPP goes ahead, Japan and UK together would be the two largest economies, and absolutely, for kind of perhaps a future renegotiation of CPTPP and just looking towards the future in terms of what it actually presents for opportunities for the UK and for Japan together to cooperate and drive forward CPTPP and to ensure to set the rules for 21st century trade, that perhaps again that leads us to think a bit about the broader context of this UK-Japan cooperation, and also ensuring, again, 21st century trade issues, whether it's sustainability, whether it's digital trade flows, are covered. So Christopher, having that kind of under our belt, what do you think are the key issues, again, for the UK and for Japan to look at going forward?
Thank you very much indeed. And it's great to connect with you all today. I think Minako gave a very good overview of where we're at with the CPTPP at the moment. And just before I kind of get into the kind of broader issues relating to the Japan-Britain relationship, key thing to remember about the CPTPP is that it's a story of evolution, because it started, its actual kind of original historic route was a bilateral FTA between Singapore and New Zealand, which then evolved into a quadrilateral, and then the TPP, and now the CPTPP. It's a question of what this agreement will become in the future, and that's the second thing I'd like to focus on in my talk. Now, of course, Minako made a very good point about how Britain already has a number of FTA links with the CPTPP members, and those links will grow as the Australian and New Zealand FTAs are put in place. But it does depend, of course, on what type of FTAs Britain has already signed with other CPTPP members. And if you look at the recently concluded negotiations between the UK and Australia, their FTA agreement, which could be ratified later this year, domestic political events in the UK depending. But as we know, the UK-Japan deal was more or less based verbatim on the previously brokered EU-Japan trade agreement. And there are many aspects of that particular FTA, which is still based on the EU regulatory model. For example, if you look at the chapter on trade and sustainable development, it's more or less the same as the one that the EU has with Japan. If you look at the UK-Australia FTA, though, it's quite closely based on the CPTPP, and therefore has been shaped by strong US regulatory influence. And indeed, if you compare the texts of the UK-Australia FTA, many of its chapters are strikingly similar in text content terms to the recently renegotiated or negotiated US-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, that superseded NAFTA in 2018. So thus the current kind of UK-Japan CEP, Closer Economic Partnership Agreement, does not provide as strong a platform for them to shape the future development of the CPTPP than compared to, say, the Australia-UK agreement. But that doesn't mean to say that Japan and the UK cannot work closely together in the Asia-Indo-Pacific and beyond going forward. And I would argue that there's a very strong case for both the UK and Japan being considered firm natural partners in a multi-sector context. So firstly, they have many similar things in common, and this includes their relative positions in their respective regional contexts. So both are large island nations and economies lying just off their regional continents, the relationships with which has been somewhat ambiguous over years and decades. The UK caught between its European and Atlantic orientations and identities, Japan between its Asian and Pacific ones. So both nations understand the balancing and management of various kinds of tensions that this can evolve. Secondly, Japan would welcome Britain's engagement in the Asia-Indo-Pacific region as a fellow influential middle power to counterbalance China, and scope exists for closer Japan-UK defence cooperation. In fact, in February last year, both nations affirmed this in a high-level defence and foreign ministers meeting. Japan also has long-standing experience of working with other Anglosphere countries with similar normative values, Australia, New Zealand, United States and Canada. And Britain itself also has strong and broad ties in the Asia-Indo-Pacific, arguably more than any other European nation. And aside from Europe, the region is strategically the most important to global Britain, and its partnership with Japan will be instrumental in the future development of the UK's engagement with the Asia-Indo-Pacific for reasons explained here, and we can discuss later. Thirdly, despite their geographic distance, Japan and Britain have a strong bandwidth of ties between them, not just in trade, finance, and foreign direct investment, but also, as Michael alluded to earlier, in education, science, technology, energy, popular culture, civil society, and many other areas. So, for example, British fashion designer Paul Smith is huge in Japan with over 400 stores there. Most of his stores are actually in Japan. Also, my youngest son, Joel, works for a London-based graphic artist who last month directed new TV adverts for the Japanese department store chain Parker. There's very broad ties between both countries. And in terms of international institutions, both countries have long-standing partnerships as fellow G7, G20, OECD members, and work across a wide range of other multilateral arrangements, the World Trade Organization, World Bank, IMF, United Nations, and its various sub-agencies, such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Fourthly, and just as importantly, both the Japanese and British are very particular indeed about their tea. So, in sum, Britain and Japan have some key things and interests in common, as well as existing strong foundations and frameworks of partnership on which an even stronger partnership can be developed. Britain's accession to the CPTPP will significantly contribute to that process, depending, of course, on how effective and impactful the agreement becomes. We can talk about CPTPP's further expanded membership and its competition with RCEP later if there's interest in doing so. We can also discuss how, notwithstanding their natural partnership between Japan and the UK, the British government also must take into account, of course, ongoing tense relations in Northeast Asia between Japan, China, and both Koreas. But perhaps the main point I'd like to get across to you, though, today is, in this brief presentation, concerns key future developments emerging now that could increasingly shape the future of the Japan-UK relationship and the future of trade itself in the Asia-Indo-Pacific and globally. I want to talk about three key areas, and the first relates to the Trade Climate Action Agenda. Now, both the Japanese and British governments have announced their own carbon net zero plans, and the UK has even taken inspiration from Japan in devising an industrial strategy plan to achieve it. First real time it's done that for some considerable time. Now, trade now represents about 60% of world GDP. If you go back to the 1970s, it was 30%, 1990s, it was 40%. So trade is going to play a major role in helping decarbonize the global economy, potentially. And there are various climate-related trade policies and issues that we can discuss that are emerging and becoming quite important, including the application of carbon pricing to internationally traded goods, as is currently being planned by the EU under its carbon border adjustment mechanism, the CBAM, which looks to be initially installed from the next year in 2023 and fully operational by 2026. Now that could be a game changer. And the UK has plans to introduce its own such mechanism. And just a few months ago in October, it launched its own feasibility study into establishing this trade climate policy. Now, early in 2021, Japan has also announced it was considering doing the same, as is the United States, Canada's, and other. In addition, climate goods and service industries are growing very fast and are set to expand progressively as climate change pressures mount. And this looks set to become a dominant future sector for Japan-UK trade and investment. And the broadband industrial science and technology links between both countries and their companies provides a firm foundation for this development. The second key emerging area affecting the future of global trade is how fourth industrial revolution technologies may shape future trade. So digital trade, we've been talking about already, has received growing attention in recent years and now is an emerging area of trade diplomacy. However, it gets a bare mention in the UK-Japan Closer Economic Partnership Agreement. The word digital only mentioned 7 times in that agreement. If you can compare that to the UK-Australia FTA, has a whole chapter, digital trade, and is mentioned digital trade 174 times across the whole agreement. And guess what? This agreement, or this chapter on digital trade, is partly derived from and modeled on the USMCA. And now it's important new work that Japan and the UK could develop here. Digital trade is going to play a vitally important role in shaping both economies and their trade relationship generally going forward. Another issue with the fourth industrial revolution is the potentially huge impact that 3D printing and additive manufacturing could have on future supply chain trade. This could be another potential game-changing development, depending on the progress and distribution of technology. And both Britain and Japan have possess quite considerable capacity and interest on this front. And again, this is another area of promising opportunities for them to work forward as innovative trade policymakers. The third last area I'd like to talk about is about the future of Japan-UK relations and the Asia Indo-Pacific region itself, and how this will critically shape the global system, as well as how we address global challenges facing all humanity in the 21st century. So when you're looking at the region itself, it's all too tempting still to adopt a neo-realist approach and focus on great game rivalry and geopolitical competition among the major powers. And this, of course, is important but at the same time, the Asia-Indo-Pacific's impact on the global community is expected to grow, and with it, its global responsibilities. And I'd like to see that both Japan and Britain have been relatively strong supporters of global multilateralism as institutions. While not great powers, they do exercise influence, and as partners can help foster a stronger multilateral approach within the region to tackling major global challenges like climate change. This, though, is going to be a big ask and will depend on their alliance building skills and developing alliances with like-minded nations and governments within the region. So thank you very much indeed for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, but perhaps since both of you mentioned RCEP, let's start with that. Since I guess it fits very well into the context of regional integration on the one hand, but also, Minako, to come back to your earlier remarks about, for the UK perspective, this is really about the geopolitical strategic rationale rather than the economic rationale, because if you're just looking at the economic case, in terms of GDP, in terms of trade, RCEP would arguably play a larger role than CPTPP because it makes up about 30% of global trade. So to what extent do you think that, again, for the UK and for Japan, focusing on CPTPP really is the right way forward? Minako, let's start with you, and then Christopher, if you have any thoughts to add on RCEP versus CPTPP.
Thank you very much, Marian, for the very thoughtful question. I would like to just emphasize, the importance of the, a middle power alliance that share values of the 21st century and the world economy. it's really the key for the UK and Japan. So that, I do believe the UK will become the first new member of the CPTPP, and then on the UK, once the UK join the club, the CPTPP, in addition to UK-Japan CEPA, it becomes a solid foundation for the two countries to enhance rules-based global trading system beyond the bilateral and the plurilateral levels. So the middle power strategic alliance with common values within the CPTPP member countries. Also, the core will be the UK, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. So very important than ever for several reasons. So this is something that the RCEP cannot achieve. And then for that, the three major reasons, maybe that I overlap what Chris already mentioned because it's very comprehensive. But the first, I think the three major reasons for the importance of this alliance through the CPTPP, also the Japan-UK CEPA, is the first, it's a post-war global economic order has shaped relationship between the United States and Asia and underpin the prosperity and the security of Asia. But the hegemonic battles between the US and China, as you know, is putting the prosperity in the region under strain. So we need something for that to just the middle power just collaborate together. And the second, we cannot expect US leadership in especially global trading system. So for coming years. So while the WTO reforms are going on, for example, the countries continue to use FTAs to respond to dynamic political economic changes around international trade environment. So because the UK and Japan shares interest in the WTO reforms on the one hand, and having bilateral and plurilateral alliance on the other hand, that means once the UK joins the TPP. So the two countries can fill a gap to shape 21st century global trading system by forming middle power strategic alliance. The third is about collaboration for promoting common values, as Chris just explained. I think, such human rights, environment protection becomes a very core part of the international trade policy, so especially promoting climate change and sustainable development in its socio-economic system is the key for 21st century trading system. So the UK and Japanese companies can collaborate for business opportunities arising from sustainable development goals, such as energy efficiencies and green energy and eco-friendly products and services. And then this is really area that both two governments can facilitate strategic business alliance. So I just stop here.
Great. Christopher, what do you make of that?
Yeah, those are fantastic points Manaka's made. And just to kind of add on to what she just said, I think the key thing for me is in terms of trade policy rules and regulations, I think the CPTPP has an advantage there. But for me, the key issue is the trade agenda, is how that is evolving and shaping in the 21st century. So it's not necessarily about conventional customs rules and rules of origin. I'm not sure which one of the two regional agreements will be more impactful there, but the key thing is how each agreement shapes the future of the global trade agenda. And to me, actually, RCEP may be better positioned to do that because it seems more of a broader economic partnership than the CPTPP does, because it covers more development-related issues, more SDG-related issues, for example. It also is much more large in terms of GDP terms, has more powerful players at the moment. So for me, RCEP is actually better positioned to shape the global trade agenda than CPTPP is at the moment. And that to me is the key issue.
Fascinating. I guess one of the key questions is also to what extent the UK has to simply accept the terms of CPTPP, or to what extent there is room for renegotiating or for carve-outs. And there's the kind of legal questions around that, but coming back to the geopolitical implications, do you think that for the current members of the CPTPP, they're perhaps less inclined to grant any carve-outs in light of China's potential accession to CPTPP? And I guess let me bring in one of the questions here as well from the audience that's asking, what will be China's geopolitical interest as it has applied to join the CPTPP? Minako, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, well, the China, well, of course, for the UK is we thought the first rule changer of the CPTPP, and then China came. But actually, let me just say, why did China express the wish to join the CPTPP is very much political, geopolitical strategy. According to the media, it seems like Taiwan followed China, but actually Taiwan has been, preparing for access into the CPTPP, and then actually domestically ready to go. And the CPTPP members already understand that Taiwan can just, satisfy all the rules and then they're ready. But when it comes to China's influence in CPTPP, I think this is why that I said, well, the historical background of CPTPP, and I don't know how the kind of whether the China, when it comes to the membership, whether will be the application start or not, it is very political, and then it never, unprecedented. So even though the CPTPP has a rule for the accession, China's accession is more kind of the political domain. But the important thing is, as I said, this is CPTPP is drafted mostly by the U.S. interest. So that reflects in the market-led economy. And it will be really hard. I'm not sure that China is seriously thinking about whether the China is happy to abide by this market-led regulatory regime under the CPTPP. So this is in the technical question, but this is also the substantial question whether China can respond to it. So just to finish this one, and I will just respond if Christopher have further thought.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, the CPTPP is more or less, a US regulatory agreement. If you look at the similarity of text between, say, the CPTPP and the USMCA. If you look at the state-owned enterprise chapter, which is going to be vital for China, there's a verbatim match between the two chapters. For me, I think as well, if the Americans join, they'll want to rename it. I can't see the Democrats or the Republicans going for rejoining an agreement which is now a little bit old from their point of view, and I think they would want to actually rename it. Now, of course, if China joins before the US, they have the potential influence to block the US from joining. I mean, that could actually happen potentially. I'm not too sure if it would, or whether it would be in China's interest to do that. But it goes back to my other key point. I mean, this is an evolving agreement, and the name could evolve depending on who joins. If the Americans join, they'll certainly want domestic political reasons. It will need to be renamed. Indo-Pacific Partnership Agreement, something along those lines. So there's a lot of things out there to play. It's a lot of geopolitical dynamics here. I'll leave it now so we've got more time for questions.
And there's lots of questions coming in, which is fantastic. Christopher, in your presentation, you mentioned digital trade, and there was one comment also in the Q&A by one of the participants on digital trade. And looking back, I think 2019, the G20 Osaka summit kind of came out with the data free flow with trust notion. And obviously last year with the G7 presidency of the UK, there was also a lot of focus on digital. So to what extent do you see Japan and the UK really driving forward digital trade? And how can some of those principles that have now been agreed be actually put into practice? Christopher, first you, and then Minako, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, so at the moment, the CPTPP doesn't have a digital trade chapter. It does have some coverage on digital trade. It mentions the word digital, I think, 27 times in the agreement. The UK has last month signed a digital economy agreement with Singapore, which apparently is the most ambitious such digital trade agreement that has been signed. The UK has got some interesting kind of competencies and industrial capabilities on digital trade. It's got a huge finance sector which lends itself to digital trade. It's got a number of professional service industries which are quite strong, again, lends themselves to digital trade. So from a service trade point of view, Britain's quite well positioned. I mean, it's one of the key new emerging areas of trade policy, and it will certainly be, I think, up for negotiation when the CPTPP is revised, reviewed, or reformulated into something else. So that's all I'll say for now on that.
Fantastic. Minako, please.
Yes, thank you. I completely agree with Chris. If I just add, well, there's several points, or maybe 3 points to add. So that looking at the UK-Japan CEPA going back, and then that digital trade agreement is something that's UK-Japan CEPA is a sort of mostly copy and paste of the EU-Japan EPA, but the digital trade chapter is a new chapter which the UK just made, and then this is the UK use it as a stepping stone of further, moving toward more the Asia-Pacific style digital trade governance, and that's a result we can see from the UK-Singapore digital trade agreement, and then also the currently that recently signed UK-Australia FTA, which is mostly the copy or more some part is beyond what Australia agree with Singapore with its digital trade agreement. So that the UK is maybe in that sense already go further from Japan from that, the promoting the digital trade agreement with the alliance. But let me just discuss what the two countries can do in this area. And so one is, I'd like to say that both countries have high standard or regulatory standard. And then to just promoting a good regulatory practice of digital trade among trade partner is very important. So that rather than derogating from the current high standard or the lowering the standard for others, they really have to help others to improve the regulatory governance in the digital trade. And the other thing is, as I said, well, British citizens have the have concern on the data privacy, and then also the trade policy. This kind of UK's policy journey shows that in the agreement they are narrowing the scope of the policy capacity, which to safeguard the public policy objectives in its latest digital trade agreement. So is it right direction or not? These kind of things, because the UK is really rapidly concluding many FTAs and then this agreement and so on, that not enough discussion take place at the domestic level. And then same as Japan, and that not so many, that still public cannot understand, civil society, they don't understand what's going on. So the important things I'd like to emphasize here is trust, as you said. The trust is a key for the further innovation in business. So the Japan and the UK has to have a kind of open discussion or inclusive dialogue, including all stakeholders, and open the information and then discuss at the more inclusive level, not only the policymakers level. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Right, and there's lots of other issues that I want to get into around supply chain security, but let us just pause there on some of the questions that are still coming in with regards to RCEP and CPTPP. So I'm going to bundle them just because we are running out of time. So one question is about the link between CPTPP and RCEP, and the other one around AUKUS, and to what extent AUKUS plays a role in augmenting the UK's trade strategy and involvement in RCEP. Christopher, perhaps starting with you, and then Minako.
Yes, thank you. I take the second question, I think, comes from my old friend Claire. So the agreement that the UK has just signed with Australia, as I mentioned in the beginning, it has striking similarities with. If you look at some of the end chapters, the more kind of functional cooperation chapters, like on environment, labour, small, medium-sized enterprises, state-owned enterprises, trade and women environment and empowerment. Many of these are very close match with either the CPTPP or the USMCA. And it's got quite high level of kind of regulatory ambition, which of course the RCEP at the moment doesn't have that same kind of level. However, I think from a strategic point of view, for RCEP to have another kind of market liberal Anglosphere country like Australia and New Zealand, that does substantially increase that constituency, that coalition within RCEP. And the UK has got, it's a middle power, but with some influence, right? Various kind of, soft power influence, and it could make quite a big difference if it joined the RCEP. But I'm not too sure if that is going to be a bit of an overreach, really. I mean, the current government in the UK, just to give you some background context, it's had to kind of negotiate very quickly a number of transition deals, which we used to have under EU membership with a number of 70 other countries around the world. And that's left them a little bit stretched. So I'm one of the specialist advisors to the House of Commons International Trade Select Committee, and we've been waiting ages for the UK government to negotiate this agreement with Australia. It's been delayed. It is a question of how much kind of capacity the UK has to negotiate not just free trade agreements, but quite complex ones involving quite a complex negotiation process. But I think it is important from a long-term point of view in terms of the UK's potential relationship with RCEP. I think the UK-Australia one could be quite an important kind of platform. So I'll leave time now for Monako to answer the other part.
Anything to add, Minako?
Yeah, thank you. I have nothing to add to the Chris, but maybe slightly different angle. But now we are very much focusing on the FTAs and RCEP and the CPTPP or more other. But the one thing is I just think the observing the UK trade policy is towards 21st century is more the role of the international trading system, multilateral trading system. In that sense, the CPTPP or RCEP or whatever, but the CPTPP can become the key policy forum to just reorganize the middle power, like-minded countries, alliance, and they make input to the multilateral trading, reviving, reforming the multilateral trading system. So in that sense, the RCEP in comparison to CPTPP, again, that CPTPP has more capacity in terms of membership to do that. And this is something more that, the US and Japan, UK and Japan have to more attention at the multilateral level, the collaboration at the multilateral level outside of FTA, or using the CPTPP or CEPA.
To wrap up, let me just close with one question that focuses on the major challenges in Asia-Pacific relations facing the UK, but also Japan. And I guess related to that, perhaps looking really at the context that you're facing, which is both still, COVID-19 epidemic, economic recovery, stresses on supply chains ongoing, but also very much the context of US-China strategic competition. And so both the UK and Japan have put a strong emphasis on economic security. Japan has just introduced a new economic security minister. Japan is also very much involved with Australia and India for a regional supply chain resilience initiative. The UK is also, again, very much focused on supply chains. Their Project Defend, is focused on that. So looking at a kind of concept of supply chain security and strengthening supply chain resilience, what do you think the UK and Japan can do in that space, both bilaterally, but perhaps also with partners? And to come back to Minako, the emphasis of the role that the WTO and the multilateral trading system can play in that. Minako, let's start with you on this last question, and then Christopher, over to you for closing remarks.
Well, as you explained, Marian, that Japan is, both for the UK and Japan, the economic security is becoming the major issues, and then not only because of the COVID-19, but the more wider geopolitical context. And then for that, I think it's more about, you know, that the UK and Japan has more other policy framework to just collaborate that in the extent. And then the important thing is, well, from the trade policy context, as you know, the many countries, well, using the protective measures, and then also the China after threat of China, what the in the region supply chain, because now they become the this relation becomes not a vertical but horizontal supply chain relation between China among the Asia-Pacific region. So that the key is in how that tackle these issues together with the UK and the Japan in the CPTPP. Also, this is also very interesting area. I stop here.
Christopher.
It's a big question, this one. I'll try to give a simplified answer as possible. I mentioned earlier about the broadband width of relations between, you know, economic relations between Japan and China. Sorry, Japan and the UK. I beg your pardon. There's quite a lot of Japanese investment in Britain and growing British investment in Japan. I do think that industrially as well, there's some interesting overlaps between the two in terms of future growth industries of the 21st century. And they're both, I haven't got kind of the hard kind of data on this, but you know, a broad knowledge of both economies and how they interact. I think that there is good potential here for them both to work at the kind of supply chain kind of level, and to keep track on how, for example, 3D printing could revolutionize supply chain trade, because when you can produce things on your own with the technology like 3D, you don't need to import from overseas. You know, and with companies increasingly wanting to have increasingly quick response time to consumer demand, 3D printing can help that, because you don't have to rely on goods coming from intercontinental distances, you know, through the Suez Canal, whatever. Yeah, there's some interesting technological changes, I think, which both countries and the companies in both countries are having to keep track of, because they could be potentially game changing and with their impact on supply chain trade, as I mentioned earlier. But I have got a lot of faith in both countries to grow that a strong and broad economic relationship going forward. That's the last message I'd like to leave you.
No, great. And thank you for finishing on that note. There is a lot of ground that we've covered today, and certainly a full agenda for the UK and Japan as they seek to strengthen their economic and trade relationship, not just bilaterally, but certainly in the region of the Indo-Pacific and at the global stage as well. So it was a real pleasure and honor to be sharing this webinar. Sorry for not getting to all of the questions. Thank you for joining us. And special thanks also to Japan House for partnering with Chatham House on this event. But yeah, please all join me in thanking Minako and Christopher for their really, really insightful remarks. And hopefully we'll have you back soon as the developments unfold. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.